Once upon a time, in the ever-evolving tapestry of British royalty, there was a woman born far away from the glitz and glamour of golden palaces and official ceremonies. Her name was Sophie Helen Rhys-Jones, and she grew up in a place most royals only read about in tabloids, the ordinary middle-class world of everyday people, where dads sold tires, moms typed letters for their bosses, and children dreamed not of crowns, but of something as simple as a summer vacation in the countryside. Yet, somehow, Sophie's life trajectory took her far beyond those humble beginnings, carrying her all the way to the heart of one of the oldest monarchies on earth. If someone were to have whispered in her ear when she was a little girl in Oxford, "Someday you will become the Duchess of Edinburgh," she might have laughed, shrugged, and carried on with her day. But fate, coincidence, hard work, and a dash of romance conspired to make her journey extraordinary. Sophie was born on January 20th, 1965, in the Radcliffe Infirmary in Oxford, a place famously associated with elite colleges and ancient spires, though her life then was worlds away from the pomp of academic gowns or aristocratic teas. Her father, Christopher Rhys-Jones, was in the tire business, selling them to all sorts of cars and caravans. It wasn't exactly the stuff of aristocratic legend, but it was honest, decent work. Her mother, Mary O'Sullivan, served as a secretary, diligently typing out reports, fielding phone calls, and engaging in the routine humdrum of office life. There were no diamond tiaras displayed in glass cabinets or footmen opening doors to greet them each morning, just an ordinary family that taught her discipline, humility, and perseverance. This unassuming backdrop would shape Sophie into a surprisingly grounded member of the British royal family, someone who, even decades later, would remain warm and genuinely human amid the swirling pomp of monarchy. As a girl, Sophie was bright, quick-witted, and sociable, but there was no crystal ball predicting her future role in the upper echelons of British society. She grew up in Brenchley, Kent, a region of rolling fields and blossoming orchards, a place that whispered with the quiet hush of rural England. Daily life for young Sophie was about going to school at West Kent, then moving on to Kent College in Pembury, where she participated in dance, drama, and whatever activities piqued her interest. She wasn't groomed for anything princely or princessy. Instead, she was encouraged to be herself, to focus on her studies, her friendships, and her growing curiosity about the wider world. She excelled at her A-levels, but chose a non-traditional route, forgoing university to jump right into a career in public relations. The day she decided to skip college might have raised a few eyebrows, but she was determined, and no one doubted her capacity to succeed on her own terms. Throughout her late teens and early 20s, Sophie spent time in London and Switzerland, honing her skills in PR. She tackled all the tasks one might expect, organizing events, managing corporate images, and ensuring that companies knew exactly how to cultivate a positive reputation. The work suited her. She was polished yet approachable, an ideal combination for building trust and forging relationships. Even in the swirl of the capital's hustle or the allure of Swiss ski resorts, Sophie kept her feet on the ground. People commented on her professionalism, her kindness, her ability to really listen. She didn't need a fancy title to make an impression. It was her authenticity that stood out. Working at Capital Radio in London, Sophie learned the ins and outs of media relations, sharpened her communication skills, and built a network of connections that would become invaluable in her future. She traveled to Switzerland to work in tourism and the ski industry. Picture her, wearing a pair of thick winter boots, perhaps helping coordinate marketing campaigns for a picturesque alpine retreat, entirely unaware that, in just a handful of years, she would be greeting dignitaries and traveling across continents in a far more official capacity. Somewhere between the crisp Swiss air and the frenetic energy of London's PR scene, Sophie found her footing in the professional world. The odd thing was how seamlessly she navigated these different realms, never betraying the sense that she felt out of place. Her colleagues described her as someone who approached new challenges with curiosity and determination, embodying that wonderful English trait of keeping calm and carrying on. She didn't boast about her career, but she steadily built it, culminating in the founding of her own PR firm, RJH Public Relations, alongside business partner Murray Harkin in 1996. It was a bold move, a testament to her confidence and expertise. At this point, she might have continued down that path indefinitely, building a public relations empire, forging brand campaigns, perhaps crossing paths with celebrities, CEOs, and world travelers. But life had something else in store, a royal twist that would change everything. The story goes that Sophie met Prince Edward, the youngest child of Queen Elizabeth II, sometime around 1993 or 1994. Depending on which source you trust, the spark between them was immediate. But their relationship wasn't the typical, dramatic, love-at-first-sight fairy tale so often ascribed to royal romances. Instead, it was quiet, subtle, and friendly. They built a rapport rooted in shared humor, mutual respect, and the sense that, beyond the titles and the lineage, there were simply two people who enjoyed each other's company. Edward had navigated a fair share of public scrutiny. He was the Queen's youngest, after all. Yet he seemed less entrenched in the limelight than his older siblings. Sophie appeared to handle the prospect of dating a prince with remarkable composure. She still lived in the real world, balancing meetings and office deadlines, but she'd now dash off occasionally to see Edward, step foot into Windsor or Buckingham Palace, and gradually discover what it meant to be associated with the royal family. For years, paparazzi and tabloids eyed her suspiciously, searching for any sign of scandal or misstep. She was compared to the late Princess Diana and Sarah Ferguson, both of whom had turbulent relationships with the press. Was this new commoner going to stir up drama? Sophie had no intention of walking that road. She continued working, carried herself professionally, and stayed largely under the radar. Eventually, curiosity about her evolved into a mild fascination. Who is this PR executive who seems surprisingly unfazed by the looming grandeur of monarchy? Sophie gave them little to sensationalize, which in a world hungry for royal gossip, became all the more intriguing. In 1999, she and Edward made it official. They got engaged, and preparations for the wedding began. The royal family announced that upon marriage, Edward would become the Earl of Wessex, and Sophie would be the Countess of Wessex. On June 19, 1999, they said their vows in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Unlike the bombastic weddings of previous royal generations, their ceremony was relatively understated, with around 560 guests instead of thousands. Sophie wore a gorgeous Samantha Shaw gown, but the atmosphere was calmer, more intimate. Journalists noted that the Queen seemed particularly delighted with Sophie, who emanated an unflappable, grounded aura. Even the choice of St. George's Chapel fit this minimalistic style, historic but smaller than Westminster Abbey or St. Paul's Cathedral, where royals typically wed. Friends and family praised the newly minted Countess of Wessex for staying true to herself during it all. Royal life, however, is no walk in the park. With the ring came added responsibilities, extended tours, public appearances, and the delicate duty of representing the crown. Sophie tried at first to balance her PR career with these new obligations, but the tension soon became apparent. The press was relentless, eager to catch her in any perceived conflict of interest. The real storm arrived in 2001, courtesy of a sting operation led by the now infamous fake sheikh, Major Mahmud. Disguised as a wealthy Arab businessman, he recorded Sophie in conversation about politics, famous personalities, and private details of royal life. When the tapes went public, it was as though the entire British media had collectively gasped. The question wasn't just about whether Sophie had revealed anything truly damaging, but about her judgment. How could a member of the royal family, even by marriage, have been so naive? The incident was humiliating, testing Sophie's resilience and forcing Edward, who also ran a television production company called Ardent Productions, to make a critical decision. They would both step away from their private business pursuits. It was a difficult choice, possibly heartbreaking for Sophie, who had invested years into her PR career and believed she could keep her professional life separate from her royal duties. But the stench of scandal within the monarchy was unforgiving. If Sophie was to remain a trusted figure, she needed to go all in on royal responsibilities. And that's exactly what she did. She apologized, took her lumps in the tabloids, and gave up the business she had built from the ground up. The dust eventually settled, and the press, ever hungry for fresh controversies, moved on. But Sophie, in quietly enduring this trial, emerged stronger, more determined to shape her life's purpose in service to the crown and to the causes close to her heart. In the years that followed, Sophie transformed into one of the royal family's most stalwart representatives. She began attending events on behalf of Queen Elizabeth II, focusing especially on charitable work across the Commonwealth. Over time, she cultivated her philanthropic portfolio, supporting more than 70 organizations by lending them her name, her time, and her passion. Her signature interests include women's rights, healthcare, education, and disability advocacy. She became more than just Prince Edward's wife or the Countess of Wessex. She was a fully engaged royal who took her responsibilities seriously, traveling to places far from the comfortable enclaves of London to meet people struggling with real hardships. Some of her most eye-opening trips happened in conflict-affected areas, particularly her visits to countries like South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Through these trips, Sophie encountered women and children who had survived violence, trauma, and immense suffering. She listened to their stories, showing a remarkable ability to empathize without condescension. These visits weren't merely photo opportunities for a bored aristocrat. They were genuine acts of engagement, part of her commitment to work against gender-based violence. In 2022, she visited these regions again, underscoring her resolve to do what many royals historically avoided, stepping into dangerous or politically unstable environments, not for personal gain, but to shine a spotlight on important issues. Sophie's philanthropic efforts extended into healthcare and disability advocacy as well, including her patronage of Vision 2020. This global initiative targets preventable blindness, aiming to give people, especially in developing countries, better access to eye care and treatment. Sophie didn't just show up for ceremonial ribbon cuttings. She asked questions, educated herself, and consistently used her platform to promote these causes. Among charities in the UK, she also represents the Royal National Institute of Blind People, RNIB, and multiple other organizations dedicated to assisting those with sight impairments. Her approach always seemed the same: direct, earnest, unflashy. She became the calm, steadfast figure who would visit hospitals, talk to doctors, comfort patients, or share a heartfelt embrace with someone seeking hope. Meanwhile, her personal life also evolved. In 2003, Sophie gave birth to her first child, Lady Louise Windsor. It wasn't an easy pregnancy. Sophie suffered a serious complication known as placental abruption, requiring an emergency C-section. The baby, born prematurely, had to spend time in intensive care, and for a while, it was uncertain how things might turn out. But both mother and child pulled through, thanks to the attentive medical care at Frimley Park Hospital in Surrey. The ordeal left Sophie with a deep appreciation for maternal health services and the fragility of life. When Lady Louise grew, Sophie and Edward decided they would raise her without the princess title, preferring to shield her as much as possible from intense media scrutiny. Lady Louise thus grew up with certain privileges, living in Bagshot Park, a sprawling estate in Surrey, but without the suffocating spotlight or the expectation to carry an HRH status. In 2007, Sophie and Edward welcomed their second child, James, who became Viscount Severn. His arrival was notably less fraught, offering the family a quieter introduction to babyhood. Again, the couple chose not to brand him with a princely style, opting for a normal upbringing, at least by royal standards. People sometimes wonder whether these choices might limit Louise and James in the royal framework, but it's become evident that Sophie and Edward wanted their children to have freedom, to cultivate their own paths rather than be tethered to the constraints and sometimes scalding glare of monarchy. Sophie's relationship with the broader royal family continued to blossom, especially her bond with Queen Elizabeth II. There are countless anecdotes of the Queen and Sophie spending hours together, simply talking, like a grandmother and granddaughter might do. Sophie's sincerity and lack of pretension resonated with Her Majesty, who had witnessed many dramas and heartbreaks over the decades. Perhaps the Queen found in Sophie a reflection of her own sense of duty and stoicism. Perhaps she also recognized how deeply Sophie had committed herself to her role, no longer half in, half out with PR businesses or other side projects. By all accounts, theirs was a genuine affection, and Sophie often found herself among the Queen's closest confidants in the latter years of Elizabeth's reign. As the years passed, Sophie stepped more and more into the spotlight, though never in a showy way. She accompanied the Queen on various tours, represented the crown on official duties both at home and abroad, and took her philanthropic work to new heights. She became a recognized figure at royal events, trooping the color, Remembrance Sunday, state banquets, always dressed elegantly but modestly, always smiling and engaging with the public. Her style was classic but not outdated, modern but not attention-seeking. In the background of all these official engagements, Sophie nurtured a simple but telling approach. Focus on the cause, not on me. In 2022, the royal family faced one of its greatest collective sorrows in modern history, the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. During the funeral and subsequent ceremonies, Sophie was visibly affected, shedding tears openly and comforting other members of the family. The world saw her as not just a dutiful duchess, but as a woman mourning a beloved mother-in-law, someone whose bond with the Queen had transcended formalities and become something genuinely familial. People remembered that Sophie was often described as the Queen's rock in her final years, and that closeness shone through amid the ceremony and heartbreak of the moment. Then in March 2023, a new chapter arrived. With Charles III's ascension to the throne, he decided to honor Edward with a new title, Duke of Edinburgh. For Sophie, that meant that she became the Duchess of Edinburgh, a title famously associated with the late Prince Philip. And with that promotion came a renewed sense of purpose. The Duke of Edinburgh's Award, an initiative created by Prince Philip to support youth development in areas like sports, community service, and adventure, now fell more prominently under Edward and Sophie's stewardship. Though both had already been involved in the program for years, this symbolic passing of the torch made Sophie's position more significant. She could serve as a bridge between the old and new eras, continuing Philip's legacy while also molding the award scheme to meet contemporary challenges faced by young people. One could argue that Sophie's evolution into the Duchess of Edinburgh is a testament not just to the monarchy's capacity for reinvention, but to her own journey from middle-class girl in Oxford to self-made PR professional, to countess, and ultimately to the heart of the modern royal family. Far from being an aloof figurehead, she leverages her experience in communications, her compassion, and her sense of duty to champion causes that matter to her. And in doing so, she has arguably become one of the most trusted, reliable, and, some might say, underrated members of the House of Windsor. In reflecting on her life, from a PR standpoint, Sophie's story is pure gold. Here is a woman who learned the art of persuasion and public image as a working professional, then had to master both on a scale far beyond anything she could have anticipated. The monarchy itself is a brand, arguably one of the oldest in the world, and Sophie, with her professional polish and personal empathy, has contributed significantly to the rebranding and modernization of the royal family in the 21st century. That she managed to overcome a humiliating tabloid scandal only to emerge more dignified and more beloved speaks volumes about her resilience. She is also living proof that not all royal romances need to be tempestuous or overshadowed by heartbreak. Her marriage to Prince Edward is widely regarded as stable, even happy, a remarkable feat under the microscope of relentless public scrutiny. They share a sense of humor, a devotion to their children, and a clear understanding of what their roles entail. Without the weight of direct succession looming over them, they have the freedom to pursue philanthropic goals with a certain ease, which Sophie has channeled into building a comprehensive charitable portfolio.